Hermes Trismegistus is the purported author of the Hermetic Corpus, a series of sacred texts that are the basis of Hermeticism, origin and identity. Hermes Trismegistus may be a representation of the syncretic combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Greeks in Hellenistic Egypt recognized the equivalence of Hermes and Thoth. Consequently, the two gods were worshipped as one in what had been the temple of Thoth in Khumnu, which the Greeks called Hermopolis. Both Hermes and Thoth were gods of writing and of magic in the respective cultures. Hermes, the Greek god of interpretive communication, was combined with Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, to become the patron of astrology and alchemy. In addition, both gods were psychopomps, guiding souls to the afterlife. The Egyptian priest and polymath Imhotep had been deified long after his death and therefore assimilated to Thoth in the classical and Hellenistic period. The renowned scribe Amenhotep and a wise man named Taos were co-equal deities of wisdom, science, and medicine, and, thus, they were placed alongside Imhotep in shrines dedicated to Thoth. Hermes during the Ptolemaic period, a Mycenaean Greek reference to a deity, a semi-deity called T-Re-She-Ro-E, was found on two linear B clay tablets at Pylos and could be connected to the later epithet thrice great, Trismegistos, applied to Hermes, Thoth, on the aforementioned PYTN 316 tablet, as well as other linear B tablets found in Pylos, Knossos, and Thebes. There appears the name of the deity, Hermes, as Imahai, but not in any apparent connection with the Tricheros. This interpretation cannot be disputed. Homer refers to Hermes as the god who led the souls of the dead to the underworld and who in many cases was present in the court of the underworld, where Hades reigned. Later, in the 14th century BC, these customs were transferred to Egypt by the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. The majority of Greeks, and later Romans, did not accept Hermes Trismegistus in the place of Hermes. The two gods were regarded as distinct. Cicero enumerates several deities referred to as Hermes. A fourth Mercury was the son of the Nile, whose name may not be spoken by the Egyptians, and the fifth, who is worshipped by the people of Phineus, is said to have killed Argus, and for this reason to have fled to Egypt, and to have given the Egyptians the laws and alphabet. He it is whom the Egyptians called Eight. The most likely interpretation of this passage is as two variants on the same syncretism of Greek Hermes and Egyptian Thoth, the fourth being viewed from the Egyptian perspective, the fifth being viewed from the Greek Arcadian perspective. Both of these early references in Cicero corroborate the view that thrice great Hermes originated in Hellenistic Egypt through syncretism between Greek and Egyptian gods. The Hermetic literature among the Egyptians, which was concerned with conjuring spirits and animating statues, informed the oldest Hellenistic writings on Greco-Babylonian astrology and on the newly developed practice of alchemy. In a parallel tradition, Hermetic philosophy rationalized and systematized religious cult practices and offered the adept a means of personal ascension from the constraints of physical being. This latter tradition has led to the confusion of Hermeticism with Gnosticism, which was developing contemporaneously. As a divine source of wisdom, Hermes Trismegistus was credited with tens of thousands of highly esteemed writings, which were reputed to be of immense antiquity. Plato's Timaeus and Critias state that in the temple of Neith saith there were secret halls containing historical records which had been kept for 9,000 years. Clement of Alexandria was under the impression that the Egyptians had 42 sacred writings by Hermes, writings that detailed the training of Egyptian priests. Siegfried Marens has suggested, in Egyptian religion, the reference to Thoth's authorship is based on ancient tradition. The figure 42 probably stems from the number of Egyptian nomes, and thus conveys the notion of completeness. the Neoplatonic writers took up Clement's 42 essential texts. The Hermetica is a category of papyri containing spells and initiatory induction procedures. The dialogue called the Asclepius describes the art of imprisoning the souls of demons or of angels in statues with the help of herbs, gems, and odors, so that the statue could speak and engage in prophecy. In other papyri, there are recipes for constructing such images and animating them, such as when images are to be fashioned hollow so as to enclose a magic name inscribed on gold leaf. Thrice-great. Fountain asserts that the first datable occurrences of the epithet thrice-great are in the Legatio of Athenagoras of Athens and in a fragment from Philo of Byblos, circa AD 64 to 141. However, in a later work, Copenhagen reports that this epithet is first found in the minutes of a meeting of the Council of the Ibiscule, held in 172 BC near Memphis in Egypt. Howard explains that the epithet is derived from an epithet of Thoth found at the temple of Esna, Thoth the Great. The date of Hermes Trismegistus's sojourn in Egypt during his last incarnation is not now known, but it has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the days of Moses. Some authorities regard him as a contemporary of Abraham, and some Jewish traditions claim that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystical knowledge from Hermes himself. Many Christian writers, including Lactantius, Augustine, Giordano Bruno, Marsilio Ficino, Campanella, and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, considered Hermes Trismegistus to be a wise pagan prophet who foresaw the coming of Christianity. They believed in a Prisca-theologia, the doctrine that of single, true theology exists which threads through all religions. It was given by God to man in antiquity and passed through a series of prophets, which included Zoroaster and Plato. In order to demonstrate the verity of the Prisca-theologia, Christians appropriated the Hermetic teachings for their own purposes. By this account, Hermes Trismegistus was either a contemporary of Moses or the third in a line of men named Hermes, i.e. Enoch, Noah, and the Egyptian priest king who is known to us as Hermes Trismegistus on account of being the greatest priest, philosopher, and king. This last account of how Hermes Trismegistus received that epithet is derived from statements in the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, that he knows the three parts of the wisdom of the whole universe, the three parts being alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. The Pimander, from which Marsilio Ficino formed his opinion, states that they called him Trismegistus because he was the greatest philosopher and the greatest priest and the greatest king. Another explanation in the Suda is that he was called Trismegistus on account of his praise of the Trinity, saying there is one divine nature in the Trinity. Hermetic writings, the Asclepius and the Corpus Hermeticum are the most important of the Hermetica, the surviving writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. During the Renaissance, it was accepted that Hermes Trismegistus was a contemporary of Moses. However, after Casaubon's dating of the Hermetic writings, as being no earlier than the 2nd or 3rd century AD, the whole of Renaissance Hermeticism collapsed. As to their actual authorship, Hermetic revival. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the Hermetica enjoyed great prestige and were popular among alchemists. The Hermetic tradition consequently refers to alchemy, magic, astrology, and related subjects. The texts are usually divided into two categories, the philosophical and the technical Hermetica. The former deals mainly with philosophy, and the latter with practical magic, potions, and alchemy. Magic spells to protect objects, for example, are the origin of the expression hermetically sealed. The classical scholar Isaac Casaubon, in De Rebus Sacrae Ecclesiasticis Exercitations 16, showed, through an analysis of the Greek language used in the texts, that those texts believed to be of ancient ancient origin were in fact much more recent. Most of the philosophical corpus Hermeticum can be dated to around AD 300. However, flaws in this dating were discerned by the 17th-century scholar Ralph Cudworth, who argued that Casaubon's allegation of forgery could only be applied to 3 of the 17 treatises contained within the Corpus Hermeticum. Moreover, Cudworth noted Casaubon's failure to acknowledge these treatises as a late codification of a pre-existing oral tradition. According to Cudworth, the texts must be viewed as a terminus ad quem and not a quo. One can pay as much credibility to Isaac Casaubon's statements as one can pay to Martin Bernal about Plato and Athena. Islamic tradition. Sayyid Ahmed Amiruddin has pointed out that Hermes Trismegistus has a major place in Islamic tradition. He writes, Hermes Trismegistus is mentioned in the Quran in verse 1956-57. Mention in the book Idris that he was truthful, a prophet. We took him up to a high place. The Hermetic Corpus contains the oldest documented source for the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, translated by Jabir ibn Hayyan for the Hashemite Caliph of Baghdad Harun al-Rashid the Abbasid. Jabir ibn Hayyan, a Shiite identified as Jabir al-Sufi, was a student of Ja'far al-Sadiq Hussein ibn Ali's great-grandson. Thus, for the Abbasids and the Alids, the writings of Hermes Trismegistus were considered sacred as an inheritance from the Ahl al-Bayt. These writings were recorded by the Ikhwan al-Safa and subsequently translated from Arabic into Persian, Turkish, Hebrew, Russian, and English. In these writings, Hermes Trismegistus is identified as Idris, the infallible prophet who traveled to outer space from Egypt and to heaven, whence he brought back Adam and a black stone when he landed on earth in India. According to ancient Arab genealogists, Muhammad the Prophet, who is also believed to have traveled to the heavens on the night of Isra and Miraj, is a direct descendant of Hermes Trismegistus. Ibn Kathir said, as for Idris, he is in the genealogical chain of the Prophet Muhammad, except according to one genealogist. Ibn Ishaq says he was the first who wrote with the pen. There was a span of 380 years between him and the life of Adam. Many of the scholars allege that he was the first to speak about this, and they call him thrice great Hermes. Ahmad al-Buni considered himself a follower of the Hermetic teachings, and his contemporary Ibn Arabi mentioned Hermes Trismegistus in his writings. The Futuhat al-Makkiyah of Ibn Arabi speaks of Hermes's travels to vast cities, possessing technologies far superior than ours, a meeting with the 12th Imam, the 9th from the 3rd, who also ascended to the heavens, and is still alive like his ancestor Hermes Trismegistus. A late Arabic writer wrote of the Sabians that the religion had a sect of star worshippers who held their doctrine to come from Hermes Trismegistus through the prophet Adi-Moon. Antoine Fiver, in The Eternal Hermes, has pointed out that Hermes Trismegistus has a place in the Islamic tradition. Although the name Hermes does not appear in the Quran, hagiographers and chroniclers of the first centuries of the Islamic era quickly identified Hermes Trismegistus with Idris, the Nabi of Surahs 19.57 and 21.85, whom the Arabs also identified with Enoch. Idris, Hermes was termed thrice wise Hermes Trismegistus because he had a threefold origin. The first Hermes, comparable to Thoth, was a civilizing hero, an initiator into the mysteries of the divine science and wisdom that animate the world. He carved the principles of this sacred science in hieroglyphs. The second Hermes, in Babylon, was the initiator of Pythagoras. The third Hermes was the first teacher of alchemy. a faceless prophet, writes the Islamicist Pierre Lorry. Hermes possesses no concrete or salient characteristics, differing in this regard from most of the major figures of the Bible and the Quran. A common interpretation of the representation of Trismegistus as thrice great recalls the three characterizations of Idris: as a messenger of God, or a prophet, as a source of wisdom, or hikmet, and as a king of the world order, or a sultanate. These are referred to as Misls bin Nime. Ahmed Jafar, in his essay Enoch in the Islamic Tradition, writes, "The law that developed around Idris' legendary Gnosis led to him being further identified with Hermes Trismegistus, whereby Muslims began to acknowledge Idris as the founder of alchemy as well." In the illuminationistic philosophy of the renowned Persian Islamic sage Suhrawardi, Idris was revered fundamentally as the teacher of the ancient sages amongst the Hindus, Persians, Babylonians, Egyptians, and Greeks up to the time of Aristotle. When these Greco-Alexandrian wisdom sciences and the Gnostic lore of the Sabians of Harran, who regarded Hermes as the prophet and his writings as the scriptures, spread amongst the Islamic community, Idris was immediately identified with the founder of Hermeticism. Mullah Sadra, one of the greatest Muslim sages of the later period, who said, "Know that wisdom began originally with Adam and his progeny Seth, Hermes, who is Idris, and Noah, because the world is never deprived of a person upon whom the science of unity and eschatology rests, and it is the greatest Hermes who propagated it throughout the regions of the world, and different countries manifested it and made it emanate upon the true worshippers. He is indeed the father of philosophers and the master of those who are the masters of the sciences." Bahá'í writings. Baha'u'llah, founder of the Bahá'í faith, identifies Idris with Hermes in his tablet on the uncompounded reality. He does not, however, specifically name Idris as the prophet of the Sabians. New Age revival. Modern occultists suggest that some Hermetic texts may be of pharaonic origin, and that the legendary 42 essential texts that contain the core Hermetic religious beliefs and philosophy of life remain hidden in a secret library. Some trance readings of Edgar Cayce reveal that Hermes, or Thoth, was an engineer from the submerged Atlantis who also built, designed, or directed the construction of the pyramids of Egypt. Spiritualist writer Tom DeLisle claims that Hermes Trismegistus taught him in out-of-body states, and that Hermes Trismegistus is a new incarnation of Thoth, both a conscious energy constructs without bodies. The book Kybalion by The Three Initiates addresses Hermetic principles. Within the occult tradition, Hermes Trismegistus is associated with several wives, and more than one son who took his name, as well as more than one grandson. This repetition of given name and surname throughout the generations may at least partially account for the legend of his longevity, especially as it is believed that many of his children pursued careers as priests in mystery religions.